Welcome to SUSD Spotlight, your go-to source for all things happening within the district. Whether it's celebrating student and staff achievements, delving into trending education topics, or highlighting inspiring human interest stories, we've got you covered. Join us as we illuminate the incredible endeavors taking place in our schools and forge connections within our community. Get ready to be informed, inspired, and engaged as we embark on this journey together, spotlighting the extraordinary in SUSD. Welcome to another edition of SUSD Spotlight, and today we're pleased to have in studio Joan Fudala. Joan is a U.S. Air Force veteran, but more importantly, and well known in our community, she is a Scottsdale historian. And so, Joan, we're looking forward to having a conversation with you about your experiences and what led you to become Scottsdale's historian. So welcome.
Thank you, and it's so great to be here with true history makers. Can't do anything with Scottsdale history without talking about the impact of the school district and all the, not just the school district itself, but the thousands of alumni that have made history every day here.
So can you tell us about your journey from the Air Force to now being Scottsdale's historian?
I know people always ask me, well, if you're Scottsdale's historian, you must have grown up here. Well, I didn't. I grew up in Cincinnati, went to the Ohio State University, where I majored in both journalism and history. And then I did become a public affairs officer in the Air Force, and my second assignment was as the public affairs officer here at Luke Air Force Base in the late 1970s. I fell in love with the area and eventually came back here. I've been here full-time since 1991 and had wonderful assignments in the Air Force and then a couple of corporate public relations and communications jobs. And when I came here in 1991, I was the communications director for the Chamber of Commerce and the Convention and Visitors Bureau, which were all one at the time. And that's when I really got into community history, because people were so interested, not just residents, but also visitors in the history of Scottsdale. And also I was there when the school district celebrated its 100th anniversary, and there was a lot of hoopla about that as well. So that's kind of my journey.
So how hard has it been to actually unearth the historical archives and the information to be able to tell the compelling stories that I've heard you tell many times?
Well, it's interesting because although we're on land that dates back almost 2 billion years with the formation of the McDowells and whatnot, we're really a young community. I'm thinking that Winfield Scott only homesteaded in 1888, which I know sounds old, but when you come from the Midwest or back east, that's really young. And we didn't incorporate until 1951. And so a lot of times, particularly that 1951 forward, people don't consider what they may be sitting on in their homes or their offices historic. And so it's been kind of a diplomatic process of drawing that out. And believe me, there were some wonderful historians that were collecting information before me, but I just saw that there was a real need to particularly collect a lot of the more modern day history, the 80s, the 90s, the things that really, are very interesting now, but maybe hadn't been collected because people think, oh, it has to be at least 80 or 100 years old for me to donate it to a historical society. And then layer on that, since 2000 in the digital age, so much now is being saved on people's computers that you don't get to have somebody drop off a shoebox of photos or a diary or a packet of letters tied up with a string that their grandma left behind or something. Now you have to pry it away from people's computers before they hit the delete button, and that's become a real challenge, particularly in community history.
Well, Joan, one of my fondest memories was meeting with you one winter break as we were, as a school district, celebrating 125 years. And you and I met at the library. And I don't know if just everybody knows what a resource and treasure trove that truly is as it relates to Scottsdale history and our school district history.
We're so lucky to have that at the library. Again, libraries, for a while, as the internet became more popular, people said, is there a future for libraries? Well, absolutely. Just like schools, they're a place for education and lifelong learning, but they're also the heart and soul of a community. And that special room that's at the Civic Center Library called the Scottsdale Heritage Connection that has all the high school yearbooks, and it's got old phone directories and all the memoirs that people have written. It's just a treasure trove. And so much of that information also, since about 2006, has been digitized. So not only can you go there in person and learn more about Scottsdale, but also you can go on the library's website, and it's a partnership with the Scottsdale Historical Society, and now there are over 11,000 historic photos, oral histories, documents, just you name it. It's just such a treasure trove. And I truly hope that the teachers and students in Scottsdale schools have found that and are able to use it, because that's one of the things is that, you could pick up a book that maybe somebody's written, and I've done a few, and maybe there's just a little bit of I try to keep opinions out of it, but, if you could do the raw research yourself by seeing the original things on the library's website rather than reading somebody else's interpretation in a book, I think it gives you so much more of a background or a chance to do your own discovery.
Well, it is fun to see all those pictures of that first schoolhouse or the first teacher and the first graduating class and all of those different, monumental moments that came along with not only the school district history, but the founding of our city. And so many of those leaders cross over. And so can you talk a little bit about even the foundation of the district and how it aligned with what the vision was for Scottsdale?
Well, and again, we're so lucky because, again, Winfield Scott, a Baptist chaplain who had been in the Army in the Civil War, is considered our founder. I always call him the co-founder because his wife, Helen, was just as much a founder as he was, and she was a teacher. Not here, but back east. Anyway, he was one of the original school board members when the district was founded in 1896, and he was just so dedicated to education. And because he was such an influencer, if you will, at the time, education has been such a part and parcel of Scottsdale, whether it's K through 12 education, higher education, or lifelong learning. And it was his intent to always make the schools or the school system be a community asset where it wasn't just a school and the community, but it was always together, whether it was on the school property itself or in the community. And he always engaged people in the community. And throughout the decades, you just see that, how important not only the schools themselves by facilities, faculty, and whatnot, but the influence that the alumni and retired teachers and administrators have had long after they've left the school system, and the things that they have given back to our community has just been amazing. But it all started with Winfield Scott and his wife Helen, a teacher, and their impact. In fact, she was the one that drove the 13 eligible voters to the polls in her buggy to be able to vote for the very first bond election to build the Little Red Schoolhouse. So,
and it passed unanimously?
It did, unanimously, for a princely sum of $5,000 to build that building, which now has been the most recycled building in Scottsdale.
Which is fantastic. So I think about what you just mentioned in terms of the people who have come through the system, the legacies of success, the stories, and I would love to hear some of the stories that stand out to you as significant. And then I'd also invite you to share a little bit about the memorial that was dedicated for Scottsdale students who went on to serve our country and paid the ultimate sacrifice in the way we've honored their commitments.
Well, again, we've just been so lucky to have, again, a curriculum throughout the decades that have intrigued and challenged our students so that they've excelled in so many ways. We've had movie stars and TV stars like David Spade and Linda Carter and a movie director, Steven Spielberg, that graduated from Scottsdale High, from Arcadia, and David Spade went to Saguaro. We've had star athletes. We've had the U.S. ambassador to Korea a number of years ago was a graduate of Coronado High School. We've had people that, a beloved high school civics teacher at Scottsdale High, Bill Jenkins, became mayor of Scottsdale and influenced so many of his students. In fact, one of his students was Dan Harkins, who again is the favorite place to park during a hot summer here is in one of his movie theaters. So we've just been so lucky to have, we've had a space shuttle astronaut that graduated from Scottsdale High, John Phillips, and on and on and on. I know I'd leave out so many names, but that's just giving a flavor of that. But they've served in so many other ways beyond being famous or making their mark in the nation or the world. They've been voters, they've been parents, they've been little league coaches, they've been, neighborhood activists, they've been preservationists, and then, as you mentioned, many have gone on to serve their country. Recently, just about a year and a half ago, and I know you were there, Dr. Menzel, to represent the school district, we dedicated a monument behind City Hall to the 66 all men now. Hopefully we won't add any names, man or woman, onto the monument, but it's the 66 who have lost their lives in military action dating back to World War I. And so many of them, and one of the criteria was whether they went to a Scottsdale area school. And it also includes a number of names from the Salt River Maricopa Indian community and Fort McDowell, which again, in the early days, many of those students also went to Scottsdale schools. But again, what's so unfortunately, those are the ones who never came back to be able to continue their community service, and so we honor them now on Memorial Day and Veterans Day at that memorial. But beyond that, there are so many alumni who served their country and that came back and did so many wonderful things in Scottsdale as veterans, and that go on to serve on all kinds of boards and commissions and volunteer efforts, and their kids go to our schools and they get involved in the schools, and it's a beautiful story about that continuing service, whether it's been in the military or been in some other form where they've given back not only to the schools but to the community.
Well, and it helps reinforce that special sense of place. Scottsdale really has a unique culture, and it's vibrant, and you can see, even though we've grown over time, that there's still something at its core that's reflected in the values of the founders. And I don't know that we would see that quite as clearly if you weren't doing the work that you were doing.
And, there are several aspects to doing community history and the different projects that I'm called on. Sometimes it's to recreate the legal or technical history so that we know, okay, before we tear this building down, what was here before and what should we know about this, or naming rights or something like that.
Right.
Let's not forget who this person is if we think we want to rename something or a street or whatever. But so much of it then, beyond those technical and legal things, is the nostalgia aspect. And people love that, and particularly the schools. I love going into that room in the library and seeing people flipping through yearbooks and giggling when they see,
Right.
somebody that they know looks like or whatnot. And just when you look at it, Scottsdale High School has been closed since 1983, and yet the alumni still march in the parada. And in fact, if it weren't for the alumni from all of our high schools, we might not still have parada, because they loved it so much when they were in school. It was an official ditch day where they got school off on the parada Friday, but so many of them loved Parada growing up that they're the ones now that have been carrying that forward. They're the announcers. Each school has a special place on the route where their alumni gather. So you all are doing something definitely right to create that kind of spark that they love, that nostalgia aspect of the traditions and of Scottsdale history.
There is something special about Scottsdale that keeps people coming back, because I'm a transplant. I'm not originally from Arizona, and there's kind of a running joke, that if you've been here a number of years now, you can call yourself native, and yet not the case in Scottsdale. You will find many people born and raised here who've come back to raise their family here or to develop their business here, and many of those founding families are still here, aren't they, and connected to our schools?
Absolutely, and very willing to accept newcomers, and making sure that they get the context of things. And that's something that I always try to emphasize, and whether it's talks or writing or whatever. And often when I speak to the Scottsdale Leadership new classes, I always say it's so important, whether you're an old timer or a newcomer, to know Scottsdale history, because as you start getting involved in things and you're all type A's and you want to change things or tweak things, have some respect for the people that spent hours and weeks and years trying to build something up before you go in and just change it. Know why it was done, when it was done, and then thoughtfully decide how it might evolve further with your input. So I think that's really an important lesson, particularly for community history, because it's personal at the community level. Right.
Highlight for us, if you will, the Little Red Schoolhouse and the Historical Society there, too, because it was closed for some time. And now that it's back open, it is such a special place to visit.
It is. And like I said, it's probably the most recycled building. Opened in 1910, and it was a school, the grammar school, until 1928, when the Lolama School, which is now the Artist School, opened. And then it became like a Head Start school, because we had so many immigrants working, their parents working in the cotton industry and other industries here, that it was a place where K through about third grade kids could learn English and a little bit more about American history and whatnot, and then after third grade they would join the other students at Lolama School. And then in about 1950, the school district needed many more schools due to the baby boom and whatnot, and so they were going to actually sell the building, and a philanthropist bought it and then turned it over to the city, and from 1955 to 1963 it was City Hall. And the police department, and there was actually a jail in the basement of the school. And then when the city government outgrew it, and then the public library moved in, and a lot of old timers remember the library. Unfortunately, during monsoon season, the basement would flood, and the books would get all wet, and they'd have to bring them out of the basement and lay them on the patio to dry out. And then after the library, it almost got torn down in an urban renewal project, but the Scottsdale Historical Society was founded to save the Little Red Schoolhouse, and they had a huge assist from the Scottsdale High School Key Club to pass around petitions to save the Little Red Schoolhouse. Anyway, after it was saved, the Chamber of Commerce and Visitors Bureau moved in there, and they were there from 1973 to 1991, and since 1991 it's been the Historical Society Museum. And yes, we did have a couple of dark years, but now we're back in full force. At first there was a water heater flood, and then there was COVID, and then there was the redo of Civic Center. And so for the better part of 3 years it was closed, but it's been open now for almost 2 years, and it's a wonderful place. It's totally free. It will always be free. It has wonderful exhibits. You can do the whole thing in as short as 15 minutes, or you can linger as much as you want, but it really does give a great homespun feeling for Scottsdale, and it's all run by volunteers, and they're always looking for more volunteers.
And is it still on the original site, or did it get moved?
Always on the original site at just east of Brown and Main in Old Town Scottsdale. And I might also mention I was just at the board retreat for the Historical Society, and half of the board of about 18 people are all graduates of Scottsdale High. In fact, 4 are from Coronado. I think there are 2 from Saguaro, 1 from Chaparral. Anyway.
We love to celebrate our legacies of success wherever they are and
Yes.
whatever contributions they're making in our community or others. And when we think about the future and celebrating that, we have something coming up in 2026. Can you share with us what that is?
Right, although it sounds like 2026 is far off, but the way things travel at warp speed, it'll be here soon. And that is a joint celebration of Scottsdale's 75th anniversary of incorporation, which technically is June 25th, 2026. Because we were incorporated in 1951, and then only 10 or so days later, it's the 250th anniversary of the founding of the United States. As some old-timers may remember, we had a big deal in 1976 when we celebrated the nation's bicentennial. This one's called the semi-quincentennial, which it's a lot easier to say either 250 years or celebrate 2026. And the city and the community have just started having some planning meetings so that, we can think about tie-ins with existing events and not just wait until that summertime period, but to maybe start 6 or 7 months in advance to really celebrate the best of our community and the best of our nation. And again, who doesn't like a celebration, and who doesn't like to have an excuse to celebrate the best things about our history and our community?
Well, that's very exciting. At the end of each of our podcasts, Joan, I like to ask our guests if they have a teacher, someone who made a difference in their life, an impact that they would like to celebrate and elevate. I don't know if it's someone who inspired you to have your love for history, but we'd love to give you an opportunity to share who that person might be for you.
Well, I did have people back in Ohio, an English teacher that really encouraged me to do writing, and a couple of history teachers. But also, I got to know some of the teachers as soon as I moved here. Bill Jenkins became a great friend, and he had, was mayor emeritus at the time, but he was so interested in local history, and he really shared so much with me. And also Marshall Trimble, who of course got his start as a history teacher at Coronado, and he's just been a dear friend for many years. And I remember the advice he gave me. He said, Joan, as you get started on being a community historian, the smaller the focus of your history, the more you're going to come for criticism or, people questioning what you're saying because they've lived it. If you're talking about world history or U.S. history, you may get away with a few little factual errors, but when you're talking about a city's history, there are too many old-timers that can say, I was here and you weren't, and that's not right. That's not the way I remember it. So I always thought that was great advice. But those two particularly here, even though they weren't my school teachers, they were certainly my mentors in getting into Scottsdale history. And last but not least, and we just recently lost her, is Joanne Handley, who was a pioneer family member and longtime member of the Historical Society and ran the museum when I started doing history. She helped me so much. And she was actually the school nurse in the Scottsdale School District for many years. So she does have, not only having gone through the whole school system, but also serving it as a nurse later in her life. So those three definitely come to my mind.
Well, Joan, you are a true gift to Scottsdale. I'm so grateful for the way that you shine a light on the important aspects of our history, and your inspiration to others who want to move in the same direction to help capture those stories and help ensure that the community remembers where it came from as we plan for the future. So thank you for joining us on the podcast today, and we invite our listeners to tune in anytime and any place where it fits your schedule to learn more about the amazing things that are happening in the Scottsdale Unified School District.
And we hope that you'll log on to susd.org/spotlight to pitch us ideas for future podcast episodes.